The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the chatter of travelers as Clara Rivera stepped into the vibrant train station terminal. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, casting warm patches of light on the bustling crowd below. Clara had been awake since dawn, meticulously organizing every aspect of her journey. Her sharp gray jacket and neatly pressed shirt hinted at her professional demeanor, while her practical sneakers suggested she valued comfort. Carrying a compact backpack slung over one shoulder and her phone in hand, Clara reviewed her ticket information. Train 412, private cabin, departure in 2 hours. It was all set. A small grin spread across her face. Though she'd traveled extensively, this was her first time indulging in a private cabin, a well-deserved treat for the late nights spent growing her freelance consultancy into a thriving business. The private cabin check-in queue was much shorter than she had anticipated. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair and a badge reading Robert. His stance, arms crossed and a faint frown on his face, suggested he wasn't fond of his current task. Clara approached when it was her turn, her polite smile unwavering. "Good morning," she greeted, handing over her ticket and ID. "I have a reservation for the private cabin on train 412. Robert glanced at her documents with disinterest. His gaze flicked to Clara, lingering a moment longer than necessary. A subtle sneer tugged at his lips. "Private cabin," he repeated, his tone skeptical. "Yes," Clara replied, her smile faltering as she sensed his condescension. His dismissive manner made her feel as though she were being judged. Robert scanned her ticket, his brow furrowing. He glanced back at her with a hint of disdain. "There's an issue here," he announced coolly. "This ticket isn't valid for a private cabin." Clara blinked in surprise, her brows knitting together. "That's impossible," she said firmly but politely. "I booked this ticket weeks ago. It's confirmed." Robert's smirk deepened as he slid the ticket across the counter. "I don't know what to tell you," he said with a shrug. "It's not showing up as valid." Clara straightened her shoulders. "Could you double-check, please?" she asked, her voice steady but carrying an edge of irritation. Robert sighed theatrically, pounding the keyboard with exaggerated movements. He peered at her again, his expression a mix of skepticism and disdain. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" he asked. "Private cabins are reserved for priority travelers." "I'm well aware," Clara replied, her tone crisp. "That's why I paid for one." Robert leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, miss, we've had people trying to sneak upgrades. If you can't afford it, the economy desk is over there." Clara froze. The words stung, as though they'd been aimed to humiliate her. The murmur of nearby passengers grew louder, their curiosity adding weight to the moment. "I think there's been a mistake," Clara said sharply, her voice controlled despite the anger building inside her. "This ticket was purchased directly through the official website. I have a receipt if you'd like to see it." Robert leaned back, feigning exasperation. "Security," he called out loudly, gesturing to a nearby guard. Clara's jaw tightened as a tall man in a dark uniform approached. "What seems to be the problem?" the guard asked, looking from Robert to Clara. "She's disrupting the line," Robert said smugly, refusing to accept she doesn't have a valid ticket. "That's not true," Clara protested. "I simply asked him to recheck my reservation." The guard glanced between them, his expression neutral. "May I see the ticket?" Robert handed it over. "It's invalid," he said dismissively. "Probably a third-party fake." Clara clenched her fists. "I purchased it directly. This is a mistake." The guard hesitated, then nodded toward Robert. "Let me check with Central Reservations," he said. Robert rolled his eyes but handed over the ticket details. Clara watched silently as the guard stepped aside to make the call. Moments later, he returned, handing the ticket back to Clara. "It's valid," he said firmly. "She's confirmed for a private cabin." Clara turned to Robert, whose smirk had vanished. "Anything else you'd like to say?" she asked, her tone sharp. Robert muttered something under his breath and waved her forward. Clara collected her ticket, holding her head high as she walked away. Though the ordeal was over, the sting of the encounter lingered. Finding a quiet corner, she sat down and took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over her phone, debating her next move. Finally, she dialed a number. A familiar voice answered. "Clara, what's up?" "Change of plans," she said calmly. "I'll need the company car at the station. And notify the railway's management. I want an explanation for this." On it, the voice replied without hesitation. As Clara hung up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her. It was about ensuring no one else had to endure the same treatment. Rising from her seat, she made her way to the VIP lounge, her steps confident and unshaken. As Clara settled into the plush seating of the VIP lounge, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. The tension from the earlier confrontation still simmered beneath her calm exterior, but she wasn't the type to let it fester. Her journey was far from over, both in the literal and figurative sense. Clara wasn't just a passenger who had been wronged. She was a woman who believed in action and accountability. The lounge was a haven of tranquility, a stark contrast to the chaos of the terminal outside. Soft lighting, muted conversations, and the gentle hum of background music created an atmosphere where Clara could finally think clearly. She retrieved her laptop from her bag, her fingers swiftly opening an email draft. The message to the railway's executive team would be precise, professional, and unyielding. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about ensuring change. Clara detailed her experience with Robert and emphasized the broader implications of such treatment. How dismissiveness and prejudice could tarnish the reputation of an organization. As she typed, Clara overheard whispers from a nearby group. A couple was discussing the private train cabins, their tone filled with excitement and curiosity. Clara smiled to herself, remembering why she had splurged on the upgrade in the first place. It wasn't just about luxury. It was about rewarding herself for years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices. She wasn't going to let one rude agent steal the joy of this moment. A polite voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Rivera?" She looked up to see a young woman in a crisp uniform standing nearby. "Your private cabin is ready, and the train will be departing shortly. May I escort you?" "Thank you," Clara replied, her voice warm but firm. She gathered her belongings and followed the attendant, her steps steady, her head held high. As Clara entered her cabin, the sight took her breath away. The elegant furnishings, the large windows offering panoramic views, and the small touches of luxury reminded her of why she had chosen this experience. She sat down by the window, watching the bustling platform fade as the train began to move. This wasn't just a journey, it was a statement. Clara leaned back in her seat, her resolve stronger than ever. The world could doubt her, but she would always rise above, proving her worth through actions, not words. For now, she allowed herself to savor the ride, knowing she had turned the day's challenge into a quiet triumph.